Hello everybody and welcome back to Noia Dev, the series that aims to prove that one developer can create a successful MMORPG. My name is Dane and this week on Noia Dev we've got a couple of optimizations and new weapon changes to talk about. Let's get into this. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is actually a new feature to Noia, and that's what I'm calling weapon skills. In most MMOs nowadays, a weapon is just a weapon model with a bunch of stats thrown onto it. And it's not difficult to discern what weapon is better than another. If the stats are higher on this one, that's the better weapon. So, what I wanted to do in Noia is kind of shake that up a bit in a style that another very successful game does, and that game is Terraria. In Terraria, yes, every single weapon has different stats, but they also have their own individualized effects too. So just because a weapon has higher stats than another one doesn't mean it's the best weapon for the job. And that's what I'm going to do in Noia. Each individual weapon will have what's called a weapon skill associated with it now. Whether that skill is to shoot out a beam or throw a fireball or even buff the player in a specific way. So I'm hoping that this adds a little bit of complexity to gearing up your character aside from just higher number equals better. With the addition of weapon skills, now the player has to take into account which weapon skill might suit this encounter better, and the weapon with the highest stats may not be the best solution. So a big optimization that I made to Noia is that I actually changed the skill system from using a list to using a dictionary. So if you don't know what that means, let me explain really fast. A list works like this. Say you have a bunch of cats here, and each one is individually named. You have James, Princess Donut, and Winston. Now, each one goes into their individualized box. If you know what position in the list contains the cat that you're looking for, it's very easy to find them. But if you don't know what position in the list that they are in, you have to go through individually one by one until you find the one that you want. Now, we only have 3 cats here, but if you have 1,000 cats, then you can understand how going through each one individually can take a long time. So we use a dictionary. What a dictionary does differently is instead of having incremental number for each subsequent cat in their box, you actually take the name of the cat, apply an algorithm to it, and that is the number for the box. If we take Princess Donut here and apply our algorithm to the name, then we know exactly where in the list that cat's box exists, and we can go directly to it. This means we no longer have to search every single box until we find Princess Donut. We know already exactly where that cat is going to be. The one downside of a dictionary is that you cannot have duplicate names in the list. That doesn't affect us here in Noia because each skill name is individualized anyway and there are no duplicates. So, win-win. The server is now wildly more efficient when searching for skills via name. So the last thing that I wanted to show off this week is actually something that I've been working on for quite a while now, and it was actually briefly touched on back in the Omnibus episode.
Interactable objects are now a thing.
To understand why an interactable object is significant, you have to understand what UMMO does for NPCs versus monsters versus players. In UMMO, the framework that Noia is based off of, everything is what is called an entity. Now, an entity has health, an inventory, movement, logic, targeting, skills, all the things that a player or a monster, an NPC needs to be able to function, and they are all part of an entity. The thing that separates a player from a monster for an NPC is just the logic of how it functions with those different parts. Now, in Noia, our NPCs don't need to be able to fight back or be killed or have inventories. The NPCs in Noia just sit there and have all of these logic calls by the server and never do anything with them. And that is just wildly wasting server resources. There's no way of removing pieces from an entity, it's all built in. So if I was to mess around with the entity class, I would be inherently breaking the player and monster classes as well. So I can't do that. I needed to make something new. And that's where interactable objects come into play. So if you take an entity and you remove all of its logic, you remove its inventory, you remove its movement, you remove its health bar, you're essentially left with just a cardboard cutout of what an entity used to be. We have this interactable object that is not being called by the server every single tick. I can have an infinite number of these things scattered throughout the world, and they do not affect performance whatsoever until a player actually interacts with them. With the interactable objects, they have what's called a requirement system, where when a player interacts with them, I can set these different requirements here, and based on if the player meets the prerequisites of this requirement, then the interactable object will do something, whether it's teleport the player, give the player an item, offer a quest, or start a dungeon. And the cool thing about this is I can have a whole list of these different requirements. So different interactable object NPCs can have different uses and react differently based on what the player has or has not done. If you walk up to an NPC and you haven't helped them out yet, they will offer you a quest. And now that you have assisted that NPC and you've completed their quest, they'll offer you different dialogue. It's because interactable objects know what the player has done and what they have not. They can actually be hidden or shown based on preset criteria. So if you help out this NPC getting their wagon loaded up so they can move to a different town, once you complete that quest, that NPC will no longer appear in this town and will instead appear in this town. This will give Noia a bit more of a living world sort of feel, where the player is actually making a difference. And I think that's really cool that I can use this very simple trick to actually build different worlds based on what the player has done so far. So that's it for this week. And I'm supposed to put this at the end of the video, so if you liked what you saw and you're following Noia, like, comment, and subscribe. And join the Discord. Thanks. We'll see you next time.